So let's talk a minute about bin locations in the inventory and how Lizzy deals with them, and some ideas of how you might go about laying out the different parts and locations. So to get started, one of the things that you need to be aware of is that Lizzy actually does support multi-locations. When, in other words, I have a warehouse, I have two dealerships, and they're both the same business, just two different locations. Lizzy does support that. So the first step is to actually set up the different physical locations that we store inventory in. Now, once that's set up, our next step that we're going to go through is to actually set up our bin locations, and I'm going to go through the actual controls. I'm just kind of giving you some examples here before we get into it. So as an example here, we've got different rows of parts that we have, just like pretty much any business does. So we have our rows of parts that go this way, and then you'll notice here, as in most inventory sections, we've got columns here of our actual shelves. So in the next slide, I'm going to show you how we set this up to lay things out. But one of the first ways that people try to set up their inventory, and it's actually done a lot, is that they'll actually set up the inventory in numerical order. So as an example, this might be our row of snapper parts. So we have snapper here, and then we start off with part number 1, 2, 3, and we just go down the lot. The problem with laying out inventory in that way is that as we bring in more inventory items into the system, we actually start to have problems, because now we have to actually go in and shuffle all of our parts down to make room for part numbers that are in here. And other problems are some parts don't fit on the shelf, they're too big. So now we've got to have a different section that's not in this particular aisle, but now our part numbers are no longer in sequence. There's all kinds of things that come into play when we try to do something like that. So what we recommend in Lizzy, or really as far as setting up your bins, is to label each of the rows that we have with some sort of a sign. So here we've got P for parts, and this is aisle 2. So the first part of our bin location is a P2, and then we put in the actual items here. So as an example, this spot here is actually this label. So we have P2-A2 would get me to this location. Now, doing it this way, I no longer care if snapper parts are here, or if I've got Briggs and Snapper and Tecumseh and Honda and they're all mixed together. It really doesn't make any difference, because when I go to find the part, the system's going to tell me go to P2-A2, and another benefit is that I don't have to go over to the bin and start looking down the bin for the part number I'm looking for. I'm going to go straight to this particular location on the shelf, and I've only got a maximum of probably 10 choices to choose the part number that I'm looking for. So it gets me to where I'm going much faster, and it allows me to be able to add new items and things to the inventory selections without having to go through a lot of trouble. So there really isn't a one solution better than another. It's just trying to find something that works for you. So if you like setting up your inventory in a way that you have all your parts and inventory and stuff in numerical order, then keep doing it that way if that's the way you want it. I just want to mention the way we recommend doing it, because it does in the long run. It works a lot better and gives you a few more choices. Now, in the example, before we get over to Lizzy, this would be an example. Drawers we label with a D. So we have drawer 1, drawer 2, drawer 3, and then we have sections inside the drawers to tell me where in the drawer to actually look for that particular item. Parts might be P1, 2, 3, counter, the front counter, showroom floor. So just some ideas of some different ways to do it. So what we're going to do now is we're going to actually jump over here to Lizzy and take a look at how we actually set this stuff up. So the first thing is our locations, and we actually have to set the locations up to get things linked so we know where everything is. So here is an example of where we go in and add new locations to the system. And keep in mind, this is a location as a physical building, not a bin location inside of a dealership. This is actually a physical building that's different from the primary store. Now, once you get the multi-location stuff set up, and we'll have other videos on how to actually get into detail on this, but once you get that set up, we're going to go to settings, we're going to go to inventory, and then inventory bins. And we've got a couple different ways to create bin locations inside of Lizzy. The first is to manually create a new bin location. I just type in that I want to call this thing B1, and then tell it what location I want to put the bin in, and then tell it to save it, and that'll insert a single bin location into my list. This is something you might do from the point of, we've already got our inventory and now we need to add a new section to put some additional blades or belts or wheels or whatever it happens to be that we didn't have in there originally. So that would be a kind of a one-off that you could do. Another thing is when we're editing any of these bin locations, it'll actually fill in the information up here in this top section to edit a single bin location. And you'll also notice here that we have a print price on barcode labels. What that actually is for is if let's say I have certain parts that sit up on the showroom floor and I want to go ahead and have the prices print on those, Lizzy actually has the ability to flag you whenever prices change to let you know that you need to reprint those barcode labels. So and it also lets Lizzy know when you're printing barcode labels which specific labels need to have prices on them and which ones don't, instead of just globally printing prices on everything. So this bottom section here actually allows us to group or batch create bin locations. So as an example, if I know that I'm going to have 10 bins in one of my groups, so let's say I'm dealing with group P1, and then I want to start with A1 through, or I'm sorry, this actually would be P1-A, and then I want to put on the end of that 1 through 10. So I've got 10 different rows on my shelf, and I'm going to start with P1-A, that's the column I'm doing, and then 1 through 10 for the different rows, and then we're going to do this for store 1. When I hit the save button here, Lizzy will actually create all 10 of these bins in a single click, so I don't have to sit here and go one at a time to create the different bin locations. So that really is all there is to creating the bins. The big thing with the bin locations is actually just thinking about the future and how you're going to manage the bins and how you're going to have a new employee be able to walk into your dealership and be able to pick up on where the parts are located without having to learn some big complex system that you have, or having to run down an aisle looking for part numbers, because when the part numbers are not, they may be in sequence, but when you skip from a 700 number to a 900 number, it causes some problems trying to go through and look for things. So those are just a few of our recommendations with respect to setting up bin locations.